USCFootball.com, I'm Keely Eure here with Dan Weber for instant analysis of USC's Wednesday practice of UCLA week. Now, this is the day we get to talk to defensive coaches and players, and of course we had to ask them about last year's performance against UCLA. I think it's a performance that both defensive players and coaches want to forget, just because UCLA came out and torched them, at least in the run game. Josh Kelly, UCLA's running back, had almost 300 yards. What did they have to say about that performance and their takeaways a season later?
Well, I talked to Coach Chad, who's new. And I said, have you watched that film from last year? And he's got the D-line, obviously, so that was a big part of the problem. And he said, oh, yeah, I watched it. I said, what did you think? He said, I don't know what was going on. He said, they couldn't get lined up. I mean, how could you not get lined up properly? And I said, what do you think was going on there? And he said, he said, I wasn't here. I don't know what happened. I can see what was going on the film, but I'm not going to go there. He said, what I'm doing is just trying to make sure it doesn't happen again. Yeah. And, we were going over it today, and he said the benefit is Cal kind of runs the same stuff. And so we've got, last week's game to help us get ready. And he said, but even today, there were some times where we weren't getting lined up. There was a little confusion and all that, but he said, I think we really figured it out. And I thought they adjusted really well at practice. But he said, he said, oh, yeah, I watched that film. And, you have to. It was one of the all-time, for Joshua Kelly, that was the second most yards ever gained against a USC team in history by a running back. So that was, as you say, a performance to remember, a performance to forget. Clancy kind of, on the other hand, said, it's one of those things, you deal with it after the game, and then you move on. He said, they've got different players, we've got different players, how much it, matters this year. And I wouldn't blame Clancy for kind of wanting to forget that game. I mean, if, as a guy who's been a defensive coordinator all these years, and you would like him to say that's the worst ever, but that's just not Clancy. He's not going to go there. Yeah. But it was pretty bad.
Yeah, and you mentioned different players. It's also a different defensive front for USC this time around, partially due to that performance and showing the errors in that front that they were running, the 5-2. What do you see now with this matchup, now that USC is kind of going in a different direction?
They can get lined up. That's because that was stuff that was, where you would expect USC to have the strength inside, and Coach Chad has talked about that from tackle to tackle, and that's where Kelly was running. And and they've also got a quarterback who can get to the edge. And so the two places that obviously last year or a couple of times this year where, they haven't held up from tackle to tackle. So, there's some dangerous areas that, for USC against UCLA. Now, the matchup flips when it goes the other way because UCLA doesn't really defend the pass at all. Yeah. And now, they're looking at USC and saying, that's going to be a tough matchup for us. But it's interesting, both defenses are really going to have a tough matchup, I think, because what UCLA does, kind of just the way when you saw it last year, you just thought, gosh, they're matching up so perfectly against USC, and USC didn't seem to have any ability to adjust or handle it. It got worse as the game went on, and so we'll see how USC handles it this week. But I think they've looked pretty upbeat about the way they've gone about defense. They immediately are getting into, we're still there in our 20 minutes.
Yeah, one scout.
They're already in scout team for the defense. So I don't think we've seen that this year, and they're going, 11 on 11 right away, and going fast. Maybe faster than we've seen. So it does look like, they're not going to be tackling, but it does look like they're trying to address certainly what happened last year.
Yeah, and as far as their game plan, Greg Burns kind of gave a little bit away when he said that they're going to try and sell out to stop the run and force Dorian Thompson-Robinson to beat him with his arm. Now, when it comes to DTR, he's kind of been off and on this whole season. What do you expect from him come Saturday?
I don't think they know. I don't think UCLA knows. I don't think we know. And that's, I do think you want to put pressure on him and let him sort of decide it with his arm. I think that's the way you want to go. And you hope USC can contain the edge and make him make him beat you with his arm. And then you've got, all the young guys that Coach Burns is pretty pleased with, in the secondary. And there's a number of them, and he's talking about guys like Dorian Hewitt, who came out of nowhere. Said, who knew he was going to do that? Or I think he calls Chase Williams his Swiss Army knife because he can play all the, 3 positions. And he's pretty high on his guys. And he just said, we're working hard, we're trying to do all of our techniques properly. I did ask Coach Burns, the one question that just fascinates me is there's an analysis of defense that goes into both stop rate, which is how many drives do you have you faced this year, and how many times have you forced them to turn the ball over, punting it on downs or fumble or interception. And USC's not very good there. They're like 86 in the country and forcing teams to turn the ball over like 62% of the time without scoring, whereas the top teams in the country, Ohio State and Clemson, are like 87% of stopping teams before they score. But USC, where they really are having trouble, we had mentioned this a few weeks ago, they were 130th in the nation in 3 and outs, in forcing 3 and outs. They moved up a little bit, but just to 128th. So, and when you ask that question for the defensive coaches, first of all, they look at you and say, those are statistics with which we're not familiar. And then they say, we're working at it, but I haven't gotten a good explanation of how USC could possibly be 128th out of 130 in forcing 3 and outs. You just think, because it did look like they did certainly a better job last week, but it hasn't moved them up all that much.
Well, what's your explanation then?
I think it's obviously something like that has to be a combination of things. I don't know if it's a combination of penalties. They tend to get some big penalties on 3rd down. They tend to, I think their coverage looks better on 1st and 2nd down. They seem to have the ability to maybe not quite make the play on 3rd down. It's just hard to know. They haven't been that great against the run in general, and so if you give up a 1st down run and a second, teams don't have that hard a challenge getting the 1st down on 3rd down. So I think USC has given up the most rushing 1st down, in the Pac-12. They're 12th. They're last. Again, one of those stats that you just say, how is that possible? USC is, the worst team in the Pac-12 against rushing 1st down. There's a lot of reasons, but I think some of it might be the way they practice. I would think practicing harder, more tackling, and just general physicality. And playing faster under more pressure in practice couldn't hurt.
It'll be senior night on Saturday, not night, I guess senior day, I guess. Yeah. And Christian Rector is one of those seniors. You got to talk to him for an extensive period of time. What do you have to say today?
I wish I got to talk to him more, because that was between Coach Burns and Christian. No, I mean, one of the things I wanted to talk to Christian about was, and this shows he is a senior. I wanted to ask him about the targeting and the bang play. And he gave you the really good senior response. And this is the kind of thing that if you're talking to a Major League Baseball team or one of those guys, his response was, is this off the record? When I asked him about it. And it was so obvious that play happened. It wasn't just bang, it was like super bang. And he didn't even know the guys there. And it's, he was still in the defensive line posture where, defensive linemen don't turn their head up so their crown is, when they collide with offensive linemen. And so that was almost a continuation, because on that play he was, doing a stunt and coming around the handoff, the quarterback. He doesn't know that guy's going to be right there. Yeah. He's just coming in to make a play. But I won't say what he said. Yeah. But, it was interesting. He talks about, kind of the legacy part of the game, and I think his his mom went to UCLA. His grandfather
No,
went.
his mom went to USC.
Oh, mom went to USC, and the grandfather went to UCLA.
I think they both went to
You
USC.
think so? Okay, I may have heard. I was listening from a little bit away, and I just thought that sounds really interesting. But both of them did.
Yeah.
But UCLA offered him first, apparently.
No, I thought USC offered him first.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, then I totally had that wrong. Good job. It just
He
seemed.
said I wanted to honor that they offered me first.
Okay. Well, then that's the danger of trying to do two interviews at
Being
once, because
in
I'm
multiple scrubs at
going
the same
back,
time.
Yeah, going back and forth, because we don't have as much time, with the defensive guys. And there was everybody wanted to talk to both Christian and Coach Burns for some reason today. He had the biggest crowd of all. Coach Chad, kind of you start with Coach Chad and you finish up with Coach Burns.
Clancy somewhere in the middle.
Clancy's sort of in the middle. So you got to take your shots. Well, I'm glad you cleared that up, because I just thought it seemed like he had connections to both. So apparently he doesn't. So it's not. He's not in the middle at all here.
I could be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure that's what he said.
That's what he was.
Yeah.
Okay.
As far as injuries go, though, it seems pretty much status quo. Tyler Vaughns was dressed out, but we only get to see 20 minutes of practice, so we'll see. Clay Helton did say that he was 75% on Tuesday, and then Vavai Malapaya did return and practice again, which is a good sign, just because he always said that if he practices in full pads one day and doesn't come out the next, then he's had a little bit of a regression there. But we won't get full injury updates until Thursday. Looks like you want to say something.
I think Vi was moving pretty well today. I
Okay.
thought he was. I didn't think that Tyler looked like, as he came out and kind of got started, that he was quite all the way back at all. But so I would guess that maybe Vi has a better shot. Although Tyler was farther along this week at the same time as he was last week, and he still got in a couple of plays last week. So if they need him to go in, but he still looks like he's favoring that ankle.
Mm-hmm. And also, we haven't mentioned this. I don't think we mentioned it yesterday, but Palier Naoteote did not practice Tuesday or Wednesday. He is doing rehab during the practice, but he's not practicing by any means. So expect Kanai probably to be the starter on Saturday. But Dan, it's hard to believe this is the last game of the regular season. I feel like it was just fall camp. We were hyping up punters and all that good stuff. But JT Daniels, right? It's crazy times. But how do you think this one's going to go on Saturday?
I would think it's going to be hard for UCLA to get themselves back up. I think they kind of were in a place where they maybe thought they were a little better than they were, and then they run into Utah 49-3, and Utah really wanted to take it to them. I think sometimes those games aren't easy to come back from. And having the game at USC, and USC feeling pretty good about themselves, and I think they're practicing pretty well. And they've got a lot of weapons that I think it might be hard for UCLA to shut down. So I've kind of maintained like a 31 kind of point thing for USC, but I'm thinking maybe more like 41. UCLA, I mean, they do have the ability to do score in ways in which you think, oh, I wonder how they did that. And when they had that streak on, weren't playing against the greatest opposition, but they've done some their Washington State game and stuff like that you just say, wow, how'd they do that? So I don't know if you give them 41-14, 41-21, something like that. I think it's going to be a high scoring game, but I just think the firepower is pretty much all on USC's side, and I do think they show up to play. Last year, I mean, they totally did not show up to play. I mean, they were out of sync on off. I mean, they couldn't get anything done in the fourth quarter, and they you end up on that interception. It kind of ended the game where it was all desperation. UCLA just, really give them credit. For a 2-win team, they came out with everything they had. I'm not sure they can do it 2 years in a row, but that's my best shot. I don't know how it's going to go.
We shall see. And also just an update on scheduling. So next week is USC's bye week of the season, or their second bye week. And they'll have 2 practices on Monday and Tuesday. They're developmental practices, but they're going to be closed to the media. So we will be off next week and then come back for bowl practices. So just keep that in mind. But any final thoughts, Dan, before we wrap it up here?
I was wondering if the craziest thing happens in, say, Arizona beats Utah.
Sure.
I wonder if those developmental practices will turn into real practices, because at that point everything changes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the the odds are 1 out of 1,000 or whatever, but that would be real interesting if that would happen. It would change everybody's Thanksgiving week, or you just have to sit around after Thanksgiving and watch the following week with Colorado, I guess, is at Utah.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know if a snowstorm favors either team. I guess the one thing you could say is if you have a really bad snowstorm and the game is decided by somebody falling down, dropping the ball, and somebody else picking it up and running for the only score. Something crazy could happen, but you wouldn't want to be betting on it.
Yeah, no. So we shall see. But that's going to wrap it up for USC's Wednesday practice of UCLA week. For Dan Weber, I'm Keely Eure. For more, check out uscfootball.com.